Are we ready to go again?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah. So, again, just emphasizing that this is a covenant of the heart, and that's the essence, the big essence of the New Testament is God was the new covenant. God is going to give his life, his son's life for us, and that's going to bring us into a relationship that's beyond checking boxes and um, going through motions and even making it a monetary thing. I mean, by the time the first century gets there, you remember Jesus getting upset and overturning the tables? You
Hmm.
know, he would overturn the tables. Why? Because you could bring the best of your flock, and they would have inspectors at the temple, and they'd say, "Oh no, that's not good enough." And so then they would say, "We'll buy this from you," and you would buy it from them, or you would sell it to the temple, and then you'd have to buy one of theirs, which there's a markup. So you know, they can't afford to buy it for the price that they bought yours. So you've got to pay extra. Uh, and there was a whole big money scheme going on. And um, this takes all that away. Even the tithe in the New Testament becomes obsolete because the new standard is this is a heart thing. You give as you purpose in your heart. Um, and so beautiful example. I'm going to move on from that. Okay. Let me bring back up this sheet here. Okay. Let's see. So we talked about the old covenant and the new covenant a little bit. Here's some other terms that are commonly used. The terms eternal and better. And when you read through the book of Hebrews, you're going to notice these words popping up over and over again, eternal and better. The Greek word for eternal, aionios, and the Greek word for better, kraton. Um, these words are powerful and just constant in the book of Hebrews. So let me move this. Oh man, I keep messing up. There we go. Stephen, I hope you're giving me a little bit of grace since it's my first time teaching a class like this over Zoom, um, and not having the classroom there to do it.
Well, you're doing great. I'm just thinking, how can I also have a system like this?
Okay. All right. So let's take a look at Hebrews and the term eternal, aionios. I want to take a look at chapter 5, verse 9. It says, and being made perfect, he became the source of, I'll highlight it right here, eternal salvation. Eternal salvation. So Jesus is the source of eternal salvation. What does it matter? What does it matter if our home is destroyed in a flood? What does it matter? What does it truly matter if enemies kill our family or us? If we can live forever, if we're going to live forever, those things become minuscule. Um, let's look at chapter 6, verse 2. This is part of that warning text, and we're going to look at the three warning texts. Go on and leave these are elementary things, he says. Instructions about washings, the laying on of hands, the resurrection of the dead, and the eternal judgment. So the fact that judgment is going to happen and it's going to cover eternity and it's going to last for eternity, that's a basic element of the new covenant. Okay, let's take a look at 9:12. He entered once for all into the holy places, not by means of the blood of goats and calves, but by means of his own blood, thus securing an eternal, here it is, eternal redemption. Amazing, right? Jesus makes an eternal redemption so that when we face that eternal judgment, we're going to be okay because Jesus' blood helps us for that. Redemption is the idea of being bought back. I've been bought back. I've been paid for. And so we get up there and we get to judgment, and because of our sin, there's a price on our head. And the blood of Jesus says, I've bought that. I've paid that price. I've already bought that back. Therefore, making us free in Him. Verse 14, the same word, eternal. This time it's talking about the eternal Spirit. Holy Spirit is eternal. And then we have verse 15. Therefore, he is the mediator of a new covenant, so that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance. Isn't that incredible? The eternal inheritance. Um, did you know people will separate family because of inheritances? Um,
Mm,
we will fight, and brothers and sisters will become enemies, and uncles and cousins and will become estranged because of an inheritance. But this one is eternal, and it's big enough to share with everybody because everybody can have the same amount. No fighting. This one's going to last forever. And this is one you can go around and tell people about. Like, hey, join this family. You're going to get an eternal inheritance. It's going to last forever. Um, I think the only challenge is believing it, really believing it, really knowing it, really holding to it, and then convincing other people to believe it too. I've shared this in my preaching with South Africa. I'll share it with you again. There's a quote that I like this quote a lot. It doesn't even come from a New Testament Christian. It comes from as Paul would say, one of your own poets, right? But he says, we are not physical beings that try to have spiritual experiences. He said, we are spirit beings having a temporary physical experience. And that is so true. That is so true. So, as one of our own poets wrote, uh, so even the pagans, even people that are not Christians, can believe and understand that we are eternal, that we are spiritual. Um, how much more could we believe because we have been told and taught by the living God? Last one for eternal, Ionios. We'll look at chapter 13 and verse 20. Now may the God of peace, who brought again from the dead our Lord Jesus, the great shepherd of the sheep, by the blood of the eternal covenant. Do you see the law of Moses was not an eternal covenant? Interesting enough, they did use a phrase that almost sounds eternal when it would describe the Sabbath or the covenant itself. It would say, these would endure for generation upon generation. It would also say that these would um, uh, be until the end. But it doesn't use the word eternal. And the new covenant is the word aionios, eternal. So this covenant that we have with Jesus is not going to be replaced by anything else. That's what's going to get us through all the way into eternity. And not only is this new covenant eternal and built on eternal things, it's better. The word kraton is better. Let's take a look at chapter 1, verse 4. Having become as much superior, okay, that's my Bible, superior. I believe that's the word kraton. Yep. It literally means better, superior or better than to angels. Jesus is superior to angels. This is important because the Jews thought that the angels were the highest supreme being other than God. And so the Hebrew writer comes in and just spends the whole first chapter saying, no, Jesus is greater than even angels. And that's going to become a paradox because in chapter 2, we're going to talk about how he becomes a man. And yet, by becoming a man, it actually makes him deserve to become better than the angels. So interesting to see that happening. So, better than the angels. Let's take a look at better covenant in chapter 7, verse 19. Anytime somebody wants to try to preach the old covenant or go back, I always bring this up. Chapter 7, verse 19. For the law made nothing perfect. But on the other hand, a better hope, a better hope is introduced through which we draw near to God. Okay. Look at verse 22. This makes Jesus the guarantor, or in the King James, I believe it's testator. This makes Jesus the guarantor of a better covenant. Okay. Don't exchange what's better for what's not as good. Uh, Hang on to Jesus, right? And then chapter 8, verse 6. But as it is, Christ has obtained a ministry that is much more excellent than the old, as the covenant he mediates is better, since it is enacted on better promises. Okay. Um, you see this a lot in Pentecostalism. The let's go claim the promises of the Old Testament for ourselves. Um, Promises of protection and greatness and riches, and we don't want to sacrifice better promises for less than better promises. Jesus's promises are better. And remember the study we did a second ago, that word eternal. Man, everything eternal is better than everything temporary. So uh, let's keep that in mind. I think this is one of the reasons Paul probably could be single, a single person. I like to talk to single people about this, about eternity, because there is no marriage in heaven. Marriage is fantastic. God made marriage. I'm married. Um, it is wonderful. It is absolutely wonderful. But Paul said in 1 Corinthians 7, I wish you could remain as I am. Um, why is it? I think Paul was so much living in the eternal kingdom of God that he didn't want to get distracted by something that's earthly, and marriage is earthly in that sense. Now, I'm not saying it's not valuable. It is a shadow of something that is great. It is a copy. It's a good copy of the love between Jesus and his church, according to Ephesians chapter 5. But if you're a single person, um, maybe you can even get into the mindset of uh, better promises. You don't have to search forever for a spouse on earth, because heaven's going to be better, and there's not even going to be marriage when we get there. So, pretty powerful thing. All right, let's take a look at better sacrifices, chapter 9, verse 23. Y'all are great students. You never talk back, you never interrupt. I'm just kidding. I know it's the dynamic, but I'm not used to lecturing so much. Mike told me I would have to, though. Here we go. Chapter 9, verse 23. Thus it was necessary for the copies of the heavenly things to be purified with the rites, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. Okay. What's a better sacrifice? Look at verse 24. For Christ has entered. That's better. Christ is a better sacrifice. Um, and the sacrifices you make for heaven and for faith and for Christ are better than the sacrifices made in the temple or the tabernacle. Isn't that beautiful? There's a better possession coming. Let's look at chapter 10, verse 24. And let us consider I don't see it there. 1034, 1034. Here we go. For you had compassion on those in prison, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession and an abiding one. So it's like you got better things. This word possession is the word property, belongings, hyparxis. So again, you have a better possession. Um, Look at earlier in the verse. How do you joyfully accept the plundering of your property?
Mm,
I mean, government comes in and takes away your house or your land or your car or your in the United States is a big we talk about them taking our guns a lot. How do you joyfully accept the plundering of your property? He says you do that because you know you have a better possession and an abiding one. Wow.
mm,
You've got better property. Uh, they can take all they want, but they cannot take heaven from you. They can't do it. Satan can't take it from you. You can give it up, but they can't take it.
mm,
Uh, Look at verse 35. Therefore, do not throw away. Don't throw it away. Like I said, you can give it up, but don't throw it away. You got it. Isn't that powerful? That's powerful to me. Um, and then we have a better country, 11:16. This one's interesting because these guys, they were doing everything they could for the land of Canaan. And I think it's interesting that when we get to chapter 11, and we're talking about the Israelites, it says in verse 16, but as it is, they desire a better country, that is a heavenly one. Hmm. And go back and when you read the Old Testament, you read Genesis. I don't really see that,
mm,
but it must have been true because Hebrews writes it. So, what is it that they desired, and how did they desire a better country? Um, they were desiring God. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, all those guys, they wanted God. And you got to want God above the things that God can give us. Um, if you want heaven, but you don't care if God's there, then you don't really want heaven, right?
mm,
You just want something for yourself.
mm,
Same chapter, verse 35. Um, Women received back their dead by resurrection. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release so that they might rise again to a better life. Can you imagine you're being tortured and they say, okay, you can go. And they say, no, just go ahead and kill me so that they might rise again to a better life. Now, this is in the faith chapter. This is in the I believe this is true so much that I will give my life on it. And they would rather die so that they can have the resurrection. That's incredible to me.
mm.
That's a good litmus test of faith, isn't it? And then I got one more, 12:24. Speaking better things. Says, and to Jesus, the mediator of the covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word. Speaks a better word, or as the New English Bible says, has better things to tell. than the blood of Abel. So better. That's pretty incredible. Um, all right. So if we look back at our notes and we see kind of this was all about the theme and purpose of the book. Overall, Christianity has better agents of revelation. They had angels, they had prophets, they had Moses, they had the priests, better agents of revelation, and Jesus is better than all those things. They had Christianity has better agents of redemption. They had the blood of bulls, the blood of goats. They had their high priests, all those things. Christianity has the blood of the Son of God, and it is better. It's a better agent of redemption. Then we have Christ the high priest mentioned 10 times that he is the high priest, and then several more times where it mentions him as priest. Um, so leaving no doubt that this is the main thrust of the book, that Christ is our high priest and that he is our priest. Now, priest to us, if we're steeped already in Christianity, may not have the same significance that it did to Jewish Christians at the time. When you are brought up thinking that the high priest is the most important person in your religion, that he is the one that connects you as a people to God, then you revere, honor, and look up to and expect great things from your high priest. Um, and then to hear this message that Jesus is the high priest and such a better high priest in all these different ways. It's really amazing. Okay. Um let me take a let me take a 30-second break and regroup and we'll go to the next just want to get a drink of water and
Okay.
fighting my head a little bit here. Hey, does anybody have any questions or comments up to this point? I know I've been lecturing now an hour and a half. What's on your mind?
I just want to say that I leave the interjection or the what they don't understand to the students. It's all about them. Um, so unless you ask a question, maybe, and maybe they take too long to answer, or maybe they in doubt, then I will maybe answer, or make a, give a um, my view. But I am at the moment I'm learning. And my pages is written full because as you doing, I'm filling in here and I'm following, and I find it very interesting on my side. I would say I know everything, but I can always learn more, and so that's what I'm doing here on this side. But I would, as I say, I do not want to. I'm not the student. The students are there. They must uh, say whether they understand or not. Or sometimes I will from this side I would say, "Come on, students, answer." Just to poke them a little bit. They must not rely on me. See, and there is sometimes that the questions are asked, then I know that they have done those courses already, and maybe this part of information is relative to courses which they have done, you know. So then I would say, come on, you should know this answer, and so on. I myself has been lecturing and so, but I do not want to, as I say, I'm listening and I enjoy it.
Sorry, may you please repeat the question?
My,
Oh, no,
my
there was no.
question was, do you have any questions or what's on your mind right now as we've done this?
Welcome back.
Everything is clear. Everything.
Okay. I'm sorry, Susan, go ahead.
Was it Susan or Judith?
Judith.
We understand it so far what you're explaining.
Okay.
Oh, all right.
All right. So this next section is the last of our introductory material to the book, but I also think it's important, um, specifically the last few points in here, because the way that the author constructs his text in the book of Hebrews also tells us the kind of point he's trying to get across. A preacher will do this when he's preaching, or a teacher will do this when they're teaching. And they will use devices, literary devices, to try to say, I'm beginning a new point. I want you to pay attention. I'm ending this point. I'm going to move on to something else. And so, if you were to make your own outline, you might want to pay attention to some of these things because in the Greek text, he's going to show us in some really creative literary ways why, how he's organizing his thoughts and his points. Um, I'm also going to show you some things that show the style that he uses. Um, Again, it's very polished, very thought out. This is the kind of preacher who's not shooting from the hip, but they have organized their thoughts into writing something that is profound and meant to stick around for a while. All right, let's jump back in. And if you'll grab your notes and look at the page that was printed off for you today, I believe it's page 6, um, literary and text. So here's the interesting thing about Hebrews, it doesn't really read like a letter. Even though we call it a letter, we put it organizationally in with the general epistles of the Bible. We also kind of stick it at the end of Paul and his letters because we don't really know if it should go with Paul or with the general. But it doesn't really read like a letter. It concludes like a letter. It ends like a letter, but it begins as a treatise, and then kind of flows like a sermon, and then ends in chapter 13 like a letter. So it's really it's really kind of interesting, um, the way this. So a lot of people think that it was various sermons, maybe preached by someone like Paul, that have been compiled and redacted together to make the book. That's a possibility, but I don't think it's a strong possibility because of the thoughtfulness of the way it's put together and the words that are used. And we're going to see that right here in verse 1. Um, the book is also written to renew and reinvigorate the loyalty to Christianity of his readers. That's probably why I said chapter 10, the last half, is my favorite chapter in all of the Bible, because I get so drained and worn out and tired all the time of the ministry. And that that last half of chapter 10 just says you've got to be renewed. And none of that comes just from chapter 10 itself. Like the whole book is about don't forget how great you've got it. Don't forget what a great rest is coming. Don't forget what a great Savior you have, what a great priest you have, what a great sacrifice, what a great inheritance and promise and all of these things. It's really designed to just get you going again and say, yes, this is what we're about. And um, and so Uh, Hebrews really has that effect on us. It was not written to a general group. If you, and I'm not going to do this right now, but if you on your own look at these verses listed on the third bullet point, 5:11, 6:9, 10:25, 10:32, 12:4, you're going to see this was written to a very specific group because he calls them out about things that are very specifically going on with them. Um, Now, I don't know if it's a specific group in one place or if it's a specific type of group that's scattered over various places. It's hard to know, but you know he's got somebody specific in mind as the audience and recipient of this letter. Now let's look at the text. There are some really beautiful things that he does that you don't see in English or Portuguese or Afrikaans. Alliteration is one of those things that is used by this writer. So I put here um, three examples of alliteration that are really good in the book. Alliteration is where you use the same letter sound over and over again. Like if I was to uh, say Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. That's alliteration, right? Because I'm using the P P P P P over and over
Mm.
and over again. So Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers is alliteration. How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? That's alliteration again, using the k, the uk sound and the ch sound. By the way, a woodchuck could chuck as much wood as a woodchuck could chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood. That's how much he can do. In case you were interested. So let's take a look at Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 1. In English, it says, "In many times and various ways, God spoke of old to our fathers by the prophets." I actually had that memorized in the King James back in my old head, and now I can't hardly remember it in the King James. But in many times and various ways, God spoke to our fathers in times past by the prophets. But if you look at it in Greek, okay, listen to it in Greek. Polumeros kai poluptros palai ho theos lalisis to paistrain in tois prophetais. Okay, so five times we get uh this
Olu.
alliteration of pole. You see pole in the first word, pole in the third word, pal or Paul in the third word, and then down here pot, and then the last word pro. So Paul, pot, pro is the alliteration that he uses. So in us, it sounds like maybe he's just starting to talk in many times in various ways, but to them, he comes right out of the gate, and he's throwing some very preaching type, literary type attention grabbers at you. Polumeros kai poluptropos palai ho theos lalesis to paitrasin in tois prophetais. So he's just emphasizing those pros and those poles. Look at chapter 7, verse 3. Three words in a row in this verse where he talks about Melchizedek not having his father or mother or genealogy. And he says, Apator, Ametor, Genealogitas. So three words all beginning with the aleph and even the same kind of rhythm. Apator, Ametor, Genealogetos. So that alliteration coming up there. And then this other one is pretty neat. In chapter 9, verse 27, we have the phrase appointed for man to die once, but in Greek, it sounds very different because almost every word begins with aleph, the letter aleph. So if you look up here in the Greek, I've got there's the aleph, there's the aleph,
Aitai.
there's the
Lord
aleph,
voice.
or
From
alpha. I
flame.
guess some people call it alpha, and there's the alpha. In this alpha right here in the fourth word, there is a little agud accent mark that actually makes it have a H sound, but in Greek you still see the alpha first. So apoketai, tois anthropos, apax apothenein. Four of the five words have the aleph as or the alpha as the main letter there. And so that's alliteration that our author is using that we wouldn't see it if we weren't reading it in Greek. But it's powerful and beautiful. Now, these other things that I'm going to show you, think, well, some of the wordplay is in Greek, but most of what I'm going to show you now is you can tell in English these things. The author uses paradox. You know, paradox is when two things shouldn't be true at the same time, but we introduce them as if they are. Um, I feel great, but I have a headache. What do you feel great or do you have a headache? They shouldn't both be able to exist at the same time. That's a paradox, right? Um, is there a better word for paradox in your dialect, or is that the right word?
We also use that word paradox,
Excellent.
even in
So,
Afrikaans.
okay, good. So here's four examples of paradox that the author uses. Three from chapter 11 and one from chapter 12. Abel died but speaks. How do you do that, Abel? You're dead, but the author says through his death he's speaking. Beyond his death he's speaking. It's a literary device. Moses preferred the reproach of Christ over the riches of Egypt. Moses didn't even know Christ when Moses was alive. So, how does he prefer the reproach of Christ over the riches of Egypt? Again, it is a device to say Moses was looking to the things of God. The readers of Hebrews, are seeing the reproach of Christ as something they daily live, that they have gone through. And so he's connecting them to Moses and how Moses chose God's way over the riches of Egypt. Um, Also, Moses saw the invisible. Well, you can't see the invisible, right? The invisible is invisible. That's why it's invisible. It's not visible, but he sees visibly sees the invisible. And then Jesus went to the cross with joy.
Is
Who
invisible.
who through with joy went to the cross that was before him, chapter 12, verse 2. Not really, but really, right? It was something deep down he wanted to do. And so you see this paradox the way he uses these things. He also uses contrasts, and I've listed many contrasts for you on your sheet. We've already looked at the way he compares and contrasts the two covenants, the old covenant, the new covenant, the law of Moses, the law of Christ. He compares and contrasts two sanctuaries, the one on earth made by hands, the one in heaven made possible by Jesus. Two priesthoods, the Levitical priesthood under Aaron, Aaronic priesthood, versus Christ's priesthood, and Melchizedek being in that same category. Two forms of worship, the Old Testament worship uh, that was done at a specific place and time on earth versus now the worship of God that is done anywhere, all times, and connects with all people, past, present, and future, who worship God. And then I've listed for you several texts on this page of comparisons and contrasts. All of these, by the way, could be used for sermons or teaching points in your classes. Um, he compares prophets, son, and angels in chapter 1, verses 1 through 13. He compares Jesus and Moses, chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. He compares infants and adults, 11 and 14. Cain and Abel, infants and adults, chapter 5, verses 11 through 14. Cain and Abel, chapter 11, verse 4. Noah and the world, chapter 11, verse 7. Legitimate and illegitimate children, chapter 12, 7 through 11. Blessing and cursing, chapter 6, verses 7 and 8. Many priests versus the one priesthood of Christ, chapter 7, 23 and 24. Daily sacrifices versus the one time sacrifice, chapter 7, verse 27. The type and antitype. This is almost the exact same thing as the shadow and reality, or the copy and the thing that's being copied. That's what type antitype means. Um, and then the tent and the city, chapter 11, verses 9 and 10. And then Sinai and Zion, chapter 12, verses 18 through 24, which is one of my favorite sermons to preach. I preach that a lot. Um, we have not come to the mountain that is shaken, the Sinai mountain. We've come to Mount Zion. I love to preach that text because it is beautiful. It echoes back to Jesus and the woman at the well, and them talking about on what mountain do you worship, and Jesus. She asks him, you guys say you have to worship in Jerusalem, and she says we worship here on this mountain. Jesus says there's going to come a time when it's not going to be in either place. And this is the time he's talking about, is this time that is mentioned in chapter 12, that we worship God straight to Zion, straight to where he's at in heaven. That's a beautiful comparison and contrast. All right, let's look at some wordplay. Wordplay is a play on words. It means he's using words in kind of a funny or creative way to say something. Now, the interesting thing about the examples I put here, I put two examples. They are a little bit hard to translate. Um, anytime there's a play on words, that's typically hard to translate into another language. And so in chapter 13, verse 10, we get this phrase, echomen ex exhusing exousian. So you can hear the wordplay there. Um, it's like us taking the word there and using it in three different ways. Like you got there, like there's my water bottle. But then you've got there, like that's their water bottle. And then you've got there, they are, the contraction, they are there with their water bottle. So that's what we're seeing. Echo men, ex Husian, ex Susian. I mean, it's the same kind of thing. And when they translate it, it doesn't, he's not repeating the same word over and over. It comes out as something like, well, we have an altar from which those who serve the tent have no right to eat. So that's pretty neat. And then in chapter 5, verse 8, he uses the words emathen and epathen. Um, Chiron son uvios. But at the end, we get right in the middle, you get those two words, emathen and epathen. He learned and he suffered, but they sound almost exactly the same. There's just one letter difference. Um, and so, again, that's a literary device. The other thing that we see a lot in the book of Hebrews is a chiasm. A chiasm is where the structure's formed by the letter X, like this. I'll give you an example. Okay, let's go to Matthew chapter 20 and verse 6. Let's go do that real quick, because this is a one verse. It's really easy to see. Matthew chapter 20, verse 16. I think I said 6 and I meant 16. All right, here's a chiasm. So the last will be first, and the first last. So if you were to diagram this out, you would have the last and the first, and then you'd have the first and the last, and they would make an X. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Um, it's a chiasm. Hebrews uses this very often. So I've given you a couple examples. Let's go take a look at Hebrews 4:16. It says, "Let us then with confidence um, draw near to the throne of grace that we may receive mercy and find grace in to help in time of need. So again, this is a chiasm. You can see the word grace and the idea of receiving and drawing near. I think those are, if I'm not mistaken, let us, time of need, confidence, grace. I'm not seeing it. Let us draw. All right, let's take a look at Hebrews. Well, this may be beyond my ability to teach, but the chiasm is often used. The inverted order is another um, element that's used. I can show you this one. I know this.
Uh, can I interrupt you, Nick?
Yes, yes.
Uh, Just we must be um, time related because the students they must go into I don't as to say you're doing great, but we must just watch the time because they must go into some areas which is a little bit after dark, and so we do not want to go in too late. The transporter that must take them in.
I'm gonna
So if,
finish in I'm
I
gonna
just
finish in 6 minutes.
oh, okay,
All right.
right,
Uh 6 minutes. Can I do that?
okay.
All right. So the next one is inverted order that the author uses. So if you look right here in 217, he says that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest, right? A merciful and
Mm,
faithful high priest. But when you look at chapter 3 and he starts talking about Jesus, he talks about him as faithful. And then when we get down to 415,
oh,
that's 3, chapter 4, and he switches gears. He talks about Jesus um,
let's see.
being merciful. Okay, do you see that here? So he introduces the topic merciful and faithful high priest, but then he goes with faithful first and then switches to merciful. Again, it's a literary device. The inclusion, this one class I think is super important for you when you're trying to build um, topics to preach and teach from. Inclusion is where you use the same type of phrase or complementary phrase to indicate the beginning and end of a point or a section. So if I take you back to Matthew 16, Matthew 20:16, which we looked at a second ago, it says, so the first will be last and the last will be first, right? But if we also look back at Matthew 19 and verse 30, he says, but many who are first will be last, and the last will be first. So then what we need to do as Bible students is say, oh, look what the author did. They just made a sandwich for us. We need to look at what's in between that sandwich because there's a point here being made, right? The initiating of a point and the ending of a point. So we see this all
mm,
throughout the book of Hebrews. Um,
mm,
and I've given you lots of examples of these in the book of Hebrews. So use all of these to develop lessons and understand. If I've only listed one word without the three dots in between, then he's using the same word at the beginning and the end. Okay. And then the other
mm,
thing that I want you to notice is these hook words. Hook words are words used more than once at the beginning of a topic to draw you in. So let's say in chapter 1, verse 4, I mentioned angels, but then in chapter 1, verse 5, the next verse, I mentioned angels again. What I'm doing is I'm not creating an inclusion, I'm creating a hook to say, you can see where we're going with this, like angels, angels, children, children, faithful, faithful, high priest, entering. So I'm drawing you into the conversation by using the repetition of these words fairly close to each other in the beginning of the topic. Again, it's to emphasize those types of things. And that's what I was hoping you would see with both the inclusion and the hook words, that these are helpful when figuring out what to teach. Now, my Bible app that I use and I've been showing you on my screen, do you see these blue highlights on the red letters? Um,
Yeah.
the way that this application works is if I hover on a letter, it will highlight any others in there that have the same basic Greek form in the original language. So the word or, see how it highlights all the words or that are on my
Mm.
screen.
Yeah.
If I want to go down to the word first, it highlights all the forms of first or last. Um, just seeing if there's another. There's one. The
Yeah.
article the really shows up there. Um, and so you can find things like this that can help you. There's went out and going out. So it's the same verb. I didn't know that. They sound different to me in English, but they're the same verb in the Greek. Okay, class, that's all we have time for today. We're going to start special topics next class. One of them I've already given you the page for, and I've got another one that I'll be giving you at the beginning of class. We'll probably spend the first half of class on one, the second half of class on the other. I hope you have a great day. 5 minutes. Look at that. 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. I know we started a bit and you wanted to get all your time in, but I was just a bit worried about from my point of view, you're so into the lesson and the teaching that maybe you're not mindful of the time. So I just wanted to come in there because, as I say, we have this situation in South Africa that um, the I know the thing in Afrikaans, but it is the later it becomes, the more the devil is around. I'm just using now
Mm-hmm.
simple English. So the later it becomes, the more the devil is around. So the more after 9 o'clock, maybe they will reach out the destination maybe by 9:30. You see? So
Mm-hmm.
by that time you have the unwanted mowing around or moving around in the dark, and but so this is the only thing why I had to just call your attention there quickly.
No, no worries, mate.
Yeah, but I'm thankful. I'm glad I've learned again. You're a great teacher, and my pages I can show it to you is full of markings, so I'm enjoying myself.
Very good.
Yeah, you have a great afternoon.
All right.
Right, see you tomorrow. Not tomorrow, Thursday evening.
See you Thursday.
Okay, God bless.
Bye.
Bye, Judith.
Bye.
Bye, Bella.
Bye.
Bye, Pam.
See you Thursday.
Yes, just
Bye bye, everyone.
goodbye.
Meet
I
again
gotta
on
look like
Thursday.
on Thursday, Mom Poppy. I keep on very bad with names. I'm very bad with names. Mom Poppy. See you. God bless. Bye bye, Bella.
Bye.
Wait.